Community imam, so I work in lots of different places, wear lots of different hats, both literally and metaphorically. So one of my roles is as a Muslim chaplain here at Edinburgh University. I'm also a prison chaplain. I do some work with Edinburgh Central Mosque, and I love these occasions to meet people and to have these kind of discussions, which are really needed. And we're honoured to have the moderator of the Church of Scotland as well, who's with us today. So just, some brief things. We've already mentioned that Ramadan is the 9th month of the Islamic lunar calendar. When we're talking about the technicalities of fasting, it's governed by law. So we have this, in Islam we have that idea of sacred law, which we call Sharia. And when you see the word Sharia, it's usually on the front pages of a tabloid. It kind of strikes fear into people's hearts. It's mentioned in a very often a negative sense, but it's just a law which governs every action of a Muslim's life, whether it be worship, whether it be diet, whether it be marriage, divorce, and so on. So when we talk about the details of fasting, it's governed by this idea of a sacred law. What is fasting from an Islamic perspective? Because there's so many different ways of fasting, there's so many different ways of withholding, you could say. So fasting in an Islamic sense is refraining from food, drink, and sex from dawn until sunset. That's really what it is. It's an obligation for adults. It's based upon the average healthy adult Muslim that we're expected to fast, and that obligation sounds quite heavy, but that's the legal side of things, that God has decreed that certain things are an obligation and other things are recommendations. So Muslims don't just fast in Ramadan, they also fast on certain other days of the year, and they could fast any day of the year as an act of devotion to God. But there's specific days in our calendar on which it's recommended to fast, not just Ramadan. Ramadan is the obligatory fast. And when God introduces fasting in the Quran, this is the first, there's a short section in the Quran which deals with fasting, deals with Ramadan. This is the first verse in which God says, you who believe, fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you. So you have this prescription, this obligation, but it's on everyone to do it, and it's a tradition it's an ancient tradition. We believe that all the prophets and all the traditions have a practice of fasting, which is essentially what we're talking about today. Is that it's in every faith, it's in every practice. This idea of so it's not something that's new that's come along. Islam is just an extension of an ancient tradition. And what's the purpose of that? Is that you be mindful of God, you be more conscious of God, you be in a state of obedience to God, you be in a state of loyalty to God. There's lots of ways of translating this idea, but it's that fact of withholding, restraint, and all. The idea of that is all to make you in a state of heightened awareness of God, basically, in a state of heightened state of consciousness of God. And this is a little. Kind of like, I don't know if you can see all the colours of it, but people look at the kind of tip of the iceberg, that when you Muslims are fasting, and they see the kind of surface level things, not eating, not drinking, we have lots of fun, we have lots of feasting, and that's really the tip of the iceberg. All those things that you can see from the outside. Underneath is all this deep stuff that's going on, which not everyone, obviously not everyone's experiencing it in different ways, but the deeper stuff is this purification of the mind, the body, and the soul. Okay, building mindfulness of God, learning self-control. All these things which are happening under the surface, which you can't see. You can't see you can't tell if someone's fasting. It's all internal things that are happening. You can see how we break our fast, and the traditions that we have, and the meals that we have, and the food that we serve. All that's all surface level, and that's all beautiful. But really, it's about the deeper stuff that's going on inside, which you can't see, and what's happening, this spiritual process which is taking place over the course of the month. And it's almost like an annual MOT, it's your annual check-in. How are you doing spiritually? And there's a training that goes on. So we have CPD as well, which is this continual professional development that happens every year. How am I doing? I need to go on some kind of course to check in and make sure I'm up to date with my. Or I'm in tune with my spirituality or my religion or my faith, however you want to call it. So from there, in a spiritual sense, is going a bit deeper into kind of the spiritual path. And so we often use the metaphor of the path or the road or the way to God. So we use this metaphor a lot. I'm sure other faiths and other practices use it, but we have this idea of we're traveling the path to God, we're trying to attain the pleasure of God, we're trying to reach. It's not a literal travel; it's a spiritual travel. On that path, there's three main obstacles that we talk about. The first is over-attachment to worldly things. So we have to live in this life. We eat, we drink, we have relations, we have work, and we do all these kind of things. But we're told not to be overly attached to this world. We have to live in this world, but not be part of it. The second is the devil. That we believe the devil is literally an enemy. He has an effect on us. There's negative force, satanic force that's out there. We believe in that as Muslims. But the greatest barrier is the lower self, what we call the nafs in Arabic, which is the ego or your own lower tendencies for the love of gratification, of fulfilling one's desires. So Ramadan or the fasting addresses all these things. It addresses our over-attachment to the world. It kind of puts things in perspective. How much you actually need of this world. How much all these things that you desire and go after. Fasting kind of addresses that and makes you think that maybe I don't need as much as I thought I did. We're told that the devil in Ramadan is chained up. That's what we're told in our tradition, which you can take it literally or you can take it metaphorically, that the devil has less impact on us. When we're more devoted to God and we're more channeled in our approach to God, then the devil has less inroads into affecting us. And then the final one is the lower self, which is fasting is literally training your ego, saying no. Okay, we're told in this, especially in this society, it's just indulge yourself, have what you want, go after. You can have what you want, But the fasting is saying no, saying I'm not going to eat, I'm going to hold off, and that's actually very healthy and it's a very positive way of training this lower self, and it's sometimes called the greater jihad, or the greatest jihad is not the physical martial jihad, it's actually this struggle against the lower self. And when we look at the 5 pillars of Islam, they all have very much an individual element and also a communal element. So the shahada is the first thing, which is the foundation of our belief. But then we come to the salah, the 5 daily prayers. That is an individual connection to God. But there's also a communal element where we come together to pray. We gather together in mosque to pray. Zakat is giving a portion of your wealth to the poor. It's an obligation on the individual, but it has impact on the whole community. The Sawm or the fasting, again, is very much individual, but Ramadan there's a big emphasis on gathering together in Ramadan, breaking the fast together, supporting each other. And then the pilgrimage, again, is your own journey, your own wealth, your own efforts, once in a lifetime, but it's done with the whole, millions of other people as well. And then moving back to just a few things about Ramadan. So again, this idea of community, very, very important and always being kind of re-emphasized. So if you're part of a family, then Ramadan, is very much a family experience. Even children who are too young to fast love to be part of Ramadan. They all want to be, they're so excited that this because it's a change in your routine. We need sometimes to change our routine. We get stuck in our ways, we get set in our routines, and then this month comes and completely throws you out. It throws your sleep out, it throws your eating habits out, it throws everything out, and it's actually very good, because we like change. Change is positive. So the alarm will be going off at 4:30 in the morning. I'll be getting the kids up, and they're kind of half asleep coming down the stairs, trying to, getting food out on the table, and it sounds very austere and sounds very difficult, but it's actually lots of fun. It's actually great. It's actually really a really joyful time. But the real joy is at the end, when it comes to when the sun sets and we know exactly what time to the minute. Today it was 5:21, because that's when we pray our sunset prayer. Tomorrow it'll be 5:23, and so on and so on. But we're constantly watching the clock for that beautiful moment when we can break our fast together. So that's called iftar, and you might be invited to an iftar. You might take part in an iftar, which is literally a breakfast, breaking the fast together. And then we have another beautiful tradition, which is an extra, we have beyond the 5 daily prayers, we have an extra prayer at night where we pray. And again, the mosque will be full of people. We try and recite the whole Quran through the month. We divide the Quran into 30 parts, and we have one part that we recite every night, which is long. Not everyone could do that, but it's that idea of the revelation being recited. And that was my next slide. I think that Ramadan is the month of the Quran, so it's very much connected with the Quran, the month of revelation. So God says in those same verses, it was in the month of Ramadan that the Quran was revealed. So when Ramadan comes around, we're almost having an anniversary, a celebration of the fact that the Quran was revealed, and that should make us connect more to the Quran. We should recite the Quran more, we should understand the message of the Quran more, we should listen to the Quran being recited beautifully. We should, and everyone's at different levels according to their understanding. Not everyone understands the Arabic, not everyone understands, but everyone can connect at some level. Everyone can read it at some level, in some capacity. We have lots of, every year there's a new translation of the Quran that comes out. Every year there's a new app that has new resources that you can add. Even now AI, you can go to AI and give me all the interpretations of this verse. So there's constantly work being put into people, making the Quran accessible to us. So the Quran was revealed as guidance for mankind. Messages, clear message giving guidance and distinguishing between right and wrong. So that's how the Quran is described in its relationship to Ramadan. And then it's also another very important point is this idea of it's not just your own individual worship, your own individual fasting, it's how much are you giving, how much are you contributing to the community. So lots and lots of charity is given in Ramadan. Lots of charity, lots of efforts are made to try and reach out to the wider community. When you're hungry, you feel the hunger of other people more. We'll try our best to feed and make sure that people have enough food to break their fast. Someone who's physically unable to fast, someone has a long-term sickness and will not be able to fast, they're obliged to pay so that someone else can eat. For every day that they can't fast, they're paying so someone else can eat. So my mother-in-law, for example, she's diabetic, she's quite elderly. Whenever Ramadan comes, she pays a payment to a charity that feeds someone for every day that she's not fasting. Okay, so someone somewhere is going to eat. Is going to eat on your, through your act of, for your donation, basically. And then finally, what happens at the end of Ramadan? We have something called Eid al-Fitr, which is the day of breaking the fast. You actually have to break your fast on Eid. You're not allowed to fast on Eid because God has said, this is now, the fasting's finished. You completed the period, and now you have a celebration. And the celebration will be, this is where culture comes in. Islam welcomes any culture. It doesn't demand that we celebrate Eid in a certain way. It doesn't demand that we celebrate weddings in a certain way. It's culture comes in. So if you go, this is in Indonesia, I think that's something they're doing. They're having all these these balloons or whatever. But if you go to Morocco, or you go to West Africa, you're going to see Eid celebrated in a different way. All that's required in the Eid is that we get together for a prayer. We have a communal prayer, and everything else is cultural. What food you eat and what dress you wear and what traditions you have is all up to you. And we can come up with our own traditions. If we can have our own, do Eid in our own way in Scotland. There's nothing to say we have to follow what is done somewhere else. So that's Eid al-Fitr, and that's the celebration of having completed the fast. And showing gratitude to God that He's allowed us to go through the whole, complete the whole month, and then we have that celebration. And it feels kind of strange eating after having fasted for a whole month in the day. You're like, what? This doesn't feel quite right. But we have lots of fun, and we should make it as fun as possible. It's something that God actually wants us to make it that experience. So I think I'll stop there, and there's more to say, but I'll stop there and pass the baton on to Hugh. And Hugh, by the way, is an expert. He probably knows more about Ramadan than I do, so he could correct me on anything that I've said, which is...
Thanks very much, Amin, particularly for giving us that sense of the excitement that goes with Ramadan, the sense of anticipation of the coming of Ramadan. And we were just chatting beforehand, and Amin was talking about an event welcoming Ramadan. And that's come across very clearly, I think, from what you've been saying. Now, a Christian tradition, as we'll see in other respects, so is perhaps a little bit more complicated than the traditions within the Islamic tradition. And in terms of a brief outline, what I'm going to say a little bit about the scriptural foundation, then a little bit about how it's developed in the course of the history, the development of the Christian tradition, and then a little bit about some of the contemporary discussion. And with respect to the scriptural foundation, a very important text comes from the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament, where Musa in the Quran, is receiving the Torah, the law, on Mount Sinai. And I've put up there two versions, two accounts of the same event, but you can see that the shared feature is that Moses was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. And the second text adds the significant detail, I neither ate bread nor drank water. And then in the New Testament, the Christian scriptures, there is the account of the temptation of Jesus, the temptation of Isa. And again, two texts are there from different accounts of the gospel according to Matthew, the gospel according to Luke. He fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was famished. And it's these two things together that provide the biblical paradigm of the 40-day period of fasting that has become the model for Lent. Now, definition is important here. We heard from Amin that fasting in the Islamic understanding means no eating, no drinking for the month of Ramadan between dawn and sunset. A debate, therefore, has taken place about the precise meaning of fasting in the context of this 40-day period. Is it a case of abstaining completely from food and water? That's very, very problematic from a physiological point of view. Humans can do without food for perhaps 40 days. Humans can do without water for perhaps 3 days. So what's going on here in these accounts? And the suggestion that's often put is what's called normal fasting in a biblical sense may involve the consumption of no food, but does allow the consumption of water. Now, also in the biblical tradition, there are accounts of what is sometimes called absolute fasting, no food, no water, for a 3-day period. And here are a couple of texts, one from the Hebrew Scriptures, the Old Testament, one from the Christian Scriptures, where for particular special occasions there is fasting in the sense of neither eating nor drinking for 3 days, night or day. And then also in the scriptural text that Jews and Christians share, there is the idea of partial fasting, abstention from selected food or drink. And an example of this comes from the book of Daniel, where Daniel says, I had eaten no rich food, no meat or wine for 3 weeks. Partial fasting, in other words. And another important text from the New Testament is from the Gospel according to Matthew. It has this interesting text. When you fast, it's when, not if. Do not look dismal like the hypocrites, but put oil on your head and wash your face, so that your fasting may be seen by your Father who is in secret. And that certainly is a powerful exhortation to fast. The Christian scriptures also have a link between fasting and prayer. Here are a couple of examples from the New Testament where those two concepts are very closely linked. an indication of serious intent to pray and also to fast. And there's also a close link, as we've heard in the Islamic tradition, between fasting and giving. And here's a text from the Apocrypha, the period between the two testaments. Prayer with fasting is good, but better than both is almsgiving with righteousness. And alongside that, interestingly, there's also a critique of fasting, which is found within the scriptures. And here is a often quoted verse from the book of Isaiah. Is not this the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of injustice? In a sense, that's a critique of fasting. It needs to be interpreted more widely in terms of seeking justice, letting the oppressed go free, and breaking every yoke. Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, bring the homeless into your house, to cover the naked, and so on? So if we try and summarize all that and the way that's worked out in Christian practice, there's no command to fast, but particularly in that saying of Jesus, there is what we might describe as an expectation to fast when you fast, not if you fast. And these verses have therefore been interpreted, understood in a wide variety of ways, but the most common Christian understanding is that it is the partial fasting, as in the book of Daniel, which is the most widely practiced. So it's not a complete fast in the sense of avoiding food and drink. It's abstaining, setting aside certain types of food, which might be meat, might be milk, might be fish, might be alcohol, might be oil. And this is a practice which can be pursued at any time during the course of the year, but is practiced particularly in the period of Lent. It's worth saying that Eastern and Western Christians have what one might describe as significant differences about the practice of Lent. Eastern Orthodox Christians this year are running a week later than Western Christians. And there are different emphases within the different Christian churches. And I just put up there one or two examples. I hope the moderator will confirm that I'm right when I say that John Knox, the crucial figure in the establishment of the Church of Scotland, advocated a public fast at one stage of his career in 1566. So the perception that sometimes exists that Protestants don't fast certainly isn't the case. And there are other examples there from different parts of the Christian tradition, the Methodist tradition and the Anglican tradition. So these are the words which are commonly referred to during the season of Lent by Christian preachers, Christian thinkers. Many of these words, in a sense, echo what Shaykh Amin has said already about the purpose of Ramadan within the Islamic community. Devotion, concentration, introspection, self-examination. A nice phrase heard just on Sunday, cleaning our spiritual lenses. You know what it's like if you wear glasses, you get your glasses dirty. You clean your glasses and you see things in a new way. Study groups, reflections, charitable giving, all of these things are part of the practice of Lent. And there's a certain irony here in that the word Lent and indeed the word Easter actually don't have any particular Christian associations. Lent simply means the season when the days are getting longer, and Easter is actually based on the name of a pre-Christian goddess. It's a long story how these words have been taken over within Christian practice. But in terms of the immediate next couple of days, you may have heard of the idea of Shrove Tuesday. This is tomorrow, the day before Lent, when Christians often have their final feast. They empty the store cupboard before the rather simpler menu of Lent begins. And the tradition of pancakes, which are often consumed, many Christian families will be making their pancakes, is quite simply to use up the eggs and the sugar which are in the cupboard before these things are set aside for Lent. And then the day after that, the first day of Lent, is Ash Wednesday, a day when ash is used by Christians as a sign of penitence, and again as a declaration of intent to take the fasting of Lent seriously. And just one final detail on the timings. If you've been doing your sums with respect to the schedule for Lent, you may have noticed that the period from Ash Wednesday to the evening before Easter is actually 46 days rather than the 40, which is the biblical precedent. And the rationale for that is that Christians are let off fasting on Sundays. So that's the reason for Lent actually lasting a little bit more than 40 days. Contemporary discussion. Here is the title of a book published in 1977, Rich Christians in an Age of Hunger, a clarion call for Christians to respond through charity to the extent of hunger around the world. The statistics are there. Perhaps 1 billion people are undernourished. Perhaps 10,000 die each day because of inadequate food. The charitable aspect of Lent very much emphasized in that book. And here is another well-used book published in 1978 by a Quaker author, The Celebration of Discipline. And it's a powerful call for Christians to practice a disciplined life. And Richard Foster talks about the inward disciplines, the outward disciplines, and the corporate disciplines. And one of them there in chapter 4 is fasting. And he has some fairly powerful quotes about the importance and value of fasting for Christians today. I won't read them all, but there's the first one in culture, where the landscape is dotted with shrines to the golden arches. You know who that is. And an assortment of pizza temples. Fasting seems out of place, out of step with the times. It's unfashionable in a sense, but he's arguing that it is actually rather important and essential. And in medical discussion today, here is a figure who sadly died quite recently, but again is arguing from not a particularly religious point of view for the importance of fasting. And Richard Foster goes on in the course of his chapter to outline in some detail a program that Christians can follow if they want to take their fasting a little bit more seriously in terms of how to go about it, how to build up to the practice of fasting. An alternative suggestion, I suggest, might simply be to talk to a Muslim friend. Muslims, in this sense, are the experts on fasting, and Christians who are wanting to take it a bit more seriously may glean very useful advice from there. And fasting, of course, doesn't necessarily have to involve our stomachs, our digestion. Richard Foster suggests that there are plenty of other things that it's possible to take a break from entertainment, from the media, from the telephone, and the other disciplines that he mentions, fasting and prayer, fasting and giving, some contemporary examples there. So if we try to bring things together and put the two understandings of fasting alongside each other, it would be possible to say, I guess, that Christians and Muslims both talk about fasting, but perhaps when they elaborate on what they mean by that, it is a little bit different. And we may draw a contrast between the Muslim literal application and what might slightly uncharitably be called Christian sophistry, suggestion that Christians really are just not serious about fasting. I can see how a Muslim who is practicing fasting seriously might think that. Another way, putting it the other way, might be Christian freedom. In contrast to the Muslim focus on law, there are different emphases here within the two traditions. But another way of putting it might be that even if the mechanism of fasting is different, the intention is the same. And just to illustrate that, here is an advert that appeared on a billboard on the Western Approach Road to Edinburgh just a year or so ago. Feed your urge. It's an awful advert in terms of self-indulgence and over-consumption. And the study guide to Richard Foster's book has this nice phrase: when the ad man shouts out to us his four-letter obscenities, more, 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 let it remind us of another four-letter word, a rich, full-bodied word, less, less, less. And that is an ethos, a philosophy, if you like, which I suggest Christians and Muslims share through their respective ideas of fasting. Ramadan Mubarak, and have a blessed Lent. And